I am going to talk to you. I will give you the introduction, and the introduction will be very short because in some way I will make a brief description of what the rest will talk about. When one has power, one has great responsibility. Doctors, therapists, and those of us who see patients have the power to prescribe, to influence, and that carries a great responsibility. Doctors, especially specialist doctors, should consider that medicine is an art and step down from the pedestal we have as specialists. We need to start thinking about two things. First, that the patient is a whole, and second, that just because we are specialists, we may not be the ones who know the most about bones, the brain, or the thyroid in my case. There may be others who can offer us valuable suggestions. And that a thyroid, as I will explain to you later when I have time, a depression or osteoarthritis should not be evaluated simply as the injury of that organ, but rather the patient as a whole. And the patient as a whole is based on three pillars that we are going to see. For me, the three pillars are 1, nutrition, 2, the microbiota, 3, environmental medicine or toxins, and in all, absolutely all patients, we should take these three pillars into account. So, there are two types of professionals, two types of doctors. Those who, when the patient arrives, like a patient, whose case I am going to share, and who is also here, had been suffering from headaches since she was 15 years old, and there was no way to treat her. She decided to start a ketogenic diet on her own and at her own risk. He sought me out to advise him on that, and as soon as he started, his headaches completely went away. He went to his specialist, told him about it, and well, the specialist got very angry, which often happens. Instead of asking, hey, what did you do that could help other patients? He got upset and said, either you follow my treatment or you leave here. And then there is the other type of doctor, as one of my patients with osteoarthritis told me the other day. She has osteoarthritis. Well, due to the nature of osteoarthritis, with a lot of pain and inflammation, I provide her with some nutritional guidelines, and she responds perfectly to those nutritional guidelines, and her pain goes away. And then suddenly she comes and tells me super excited that her co-workers have gone to the same rheumatologist, and she has given them those guidelines to see if, it worked for one, to see if it works. So we have to break a lance in favor of the doctors. I talk about doctors because it is what I know. I am a professor at a university, a university in Madrid, which is not quite the same. And do you know how much I teach about nutrition? 1 hour. This is what students will know about nutrition for their entire lives, and that hour is clearly insufficient, only covering clinical hospital nutrition and macro and micronutrients, as well as enteral and parenteral nutrition. Just imagine, you know that doctors, and in general, all of us, I believe we are among those who think that if we haven't learned it in our studies, it doesn't exist. That's not how it is. That's not how it is. But how? Are you going to go to a doctor who really knows how to explain the importance of nutrition? It's impossible. It's impossible. Okay? So, shall we just start with the training? All right? What I was telling you, the mechanisms of mental health disruption. From my point of view, we will have to see and consider this series of things. This is a summary. Then I will delve a little into 2 or 3 topics, not all of them, because that is what the other speakers are for. Vitamins come first. The first thing we should fundamentally consider in a person with depression, Alzheimer, 2001, or multiple sclerosis, about which I will talk a little at the end, are vitamins. Primarily B vitamins, omega-3 and zinc, and especially the relationship between zinc and copper. One curious thing is that when replenishing zinc, I will start sharing things, even if I don't have time to finish, because this always happens to me, but these are interesting things. Zinc is essential for the development of adrenal hormones, primarily cortisol. If we are producing a lot of cortisol, because we are very stressed, we continuously take zinc away from the rest of the body. We take it away from thyroid hormones, we take it away from sex hormones, and we take it away from cognitive functions. It is one of the reasons why one of the first symptoms of chronic stress is the inability to concentrate and cognitive decline. In fact, one must be careful because when replenishing zinc, copper levels decrease, and this can lead to aggressive reactions. There are people you start treating and giving zinc to because their levels are very low and you think, wow, it's gotten worse. No, it's called copper damping, like the copper dumping that the English refer to. It's not that it's getting worse, it's simply a reaction because as they compensate, one little detail is that B vitamins and magnesium decrease. Aside from issues related to dysbiosis, which we will see frequently because they are absorbed at the level of the distal intestine, the small intestine has a problem with sugar. When we consume a lot of sugar, B vitamins and magnesium decrease, just as they do when there is systemic candidiasis or intestinal candidiasis, which indeed exists. So, a person with any type of neurological disorder cannot be told to eat whatever they want, because if they are consuming sugary impulses, it will lead to a decrease in this group of vitamins and will surely worsen their neurological condition. This is regarding vitamins just. To give you an idea that when a person comes in with anxiety attacks, depression, or any type of disorder, the first thing we should do, as we will see in a very nice study I have included here, is to change their diet and put them on a healthy diet. It may seem obvious, but people don't do it, and the change is enormous. Secondly, we have the deficit in the production of neurotransmitters. Dopamine, adrenaline, noradrenaline, and primarily serotonin. This is related to the neuroenteric nervous system with the famous gut-brain axis. It is very trendy. Yes, that's right. But it's not just neurotransmitters, it's also vitamins. And it's simply the connection of the vagus nerve with the enteric nervous system. I'm not going to say anything here because my colleague Mara is going to talk about this topic, and I prefer not to keep talking because otherwise I'll step on her presentation and then she'll get mad at me. But I will mention one important thing. If I don't have time to talk about Alzheimer, which was discussed yesterday in some talks at the University of Malaga about microbiota and neurodegenerative diseases, precisely at the university, that this is an unstoppable revolution already. A geriatrician was discussing Alzheimer's disease. And I was surprised because the first symptom of Alzheimer is not cognitive decline. It is emotional disturbances. Emotional disturbances. And why is that? It is due to neurotransmitters. Because the first thing that is altered in Alzheimer's disease apparently is the digestive tract. It is the microbiota. In fact, different neurological diseases have different patterns of alteration, which I suppose if Mar doesn't mention it, will be for another time. Different patterns of alteration in the commensal flora affecting our protective flora. So the first thing that is altered in a patient with Alzheimer is the neurotransmitters, which is why the initial symptoms are emotional in nature, not cognitive. Among the endocrine disorders that we also need to rule out or at least try to treat, we have reactive hypoglycemia. I see it very often. Well, it is a disorder that, if I insist, if we have time, there is a slide for you to see. It usually occurs in young women who actually have hypoglycemia but do not have hyperinsulinism. They simply experience a significant drop in glucose, typically after eating, and they have a series of symptoms that are very compatible with psychiatric disorders, which can be resolved simply and purely with diet by just eliminating fast-absorbing carbohydrates and adopting a low glycemic index diet. And well, there are some supplements that can help, such as chromium, cinnamon, etc. But fundamentally with diet, another disorder affecting many women who may go to a psychiatrist for anxiety is reactive hypoglycemia. I am not going to talk to you about the thyroid, as those who know me and have listened to me know that there are some wonderful talks about the thyroid and the rest of the body's disorders. Well, adrenal fatigue is not about alterations in adrenal function, which is the same thing I mentioned earlier. Adrenal fatigue is highly questioned. However, it is true that chronic stress, as I said before, fundamentally causes exhaustion and depression, primarily due to zinc. Then there is intestinal endotoxemia, a very interesting topic that I don't know if Mara will talk about because there are so many things related to dysbiosis and the central nervous system that I don't know if she will have time. But when there is an alteration of the intestinal barrier, there is an alteration of the blood-brain barrier, and there is endotoxemia. This once seemed like madness, and now the topic of lipopolysaccharides is being discussed more and more, and there are indeed bugs appearing in the brain. I'm not saying this lightly because they come from the intestine, and this is endotoxemia. Wow, this topic is wonderful. I really love it. I could talk about it for hours. Food sensitivities and aggression. Pilar talks about this a lot. I don't know if she will mention it in her talk. She might not have time. But there are people who have a sensitivity to gluten or any other type of substance, which manifests as aggression. She always recounts the case of a girl who was undergoing sensitivity and provocation tests, and suddenly she started acting like an angry hydra, throwing a tantrum, and the mother said that's what is happening to her. The reality was that she had a sensitivity to the product that was being tested at that moment. This means that there are many, many times when the topic of food sensitivities arises, which I am not saying are allergies. Well, they are allergies that are prolonged. There are two types of allergies, fixed and non-fixed. The fixed ones, which are mediated by IgE and are what we all know as allergies, account for 5%, while the remaining 95% are sensitivities. I am not talking about intolerances. Intolerances refer to lactose, fructose, etc., and it is more of a digestive issue. However, the sensitivities related to altered intestinal permeability are more delayed, taking 2 to 3 days to present symptoms, which is why they are so difficult to recognize and can have many manifestations. They can include arthralgias or headaches. One of the manifestations that can occur is neurological disorders or psychiatric disorders. It is, in fact, a very common manifestation. How can we diagnose it? I believe this could lead to another entire seminar here, because how to detect them and how to treat them is a fascinating topic, and I know very few people who are doing it well, very few. In fact, the only books available on these topics are in English. Let's see if we can publish one in Spanish. And then there is heavy metal poisoning, which I suppose Pilar will talk about, and it is another topic that we must always keep in mind in neurological disorders and psychiatric disorders. It is always a shame that Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, or Alzheimer goes untested. The issue of heavy metals is unfortunate. Well, to all this we must say that if it was stable, prudent, and static, it would live in death. Therefore, I accept confusion, uncertainty, fear, and emotional ups and downs, because that is the price I am willing to pay for a fluid, perplexing, and exciting life. In other words, this is who we are. This is what we are. What I mean is that the topic is much more complex than we are going to see. I will show a slide from the biological part. This is what I am referring to. Anyone who knows a little about psychiatry or psychology knows that feeling follows or continues from thought. There may be 3 important types of feelings, although I have experts on this topic here and I won't go into much detail. Well, loss of hope or fear leads to behavior that can be any of those you have here, which when taken to their pathological side result in these pathologies. Well, thought is influenced by the constitutional profile. Evidently, it's 5009, which is influenced by genetics and epigenetics. Epigenetics, in case you don't know, which I assume there is no one here who is unfamiliar with it, is the ability of external factors to influence our genome, but they do not influence by generating new genes. Rather, they simply turn the existing ones on and off. This is very important because epigenetics is modifiable. It can be modified by diet, exercise, and supplementation. So we cannot change genetics. We all know that, but we can turn genes on and off. And there are already many studies on how to turn on and off the genes we want and those we do not want. And here is chronic stress, traumatic experiences, enslaving beliefs. Well, here we would obviously have all the techniques and altered physiology and biochemistry. This is the part that we are trying to address here today. Altered physiology and biochemistry influence thinking, as we will demonstrate throughout the morning. Well, these are slides from my friend Felipe Hernandez, who always shares them with great affection because he is also an expert in nutrition and mental health. This is not new, and for a long time, many experts, very knowledgeable ones, like Pauline, have been saying that there are certain mental illnesses where there is a metabolic deficiency in properly utilizing the vitamins, minerals, and trace elements found in food. I have only put 2 slides, but there are about 15 from various renowned scientists who have been saying this since the early 20th century, and now we are in the 21st, since 1920, 1930, etc. The thing is, I don't know why it has been forgotten, because it is psychiatrists and neurologists who have been reporting it. Well, let's delve a little deeper into the fundamental relationship between the digestive system and mental health. Have I already told you that I won't insist too much? 95% of serotonin is found in the intestine. But let's not forget about the liver, okay? They always go together, they always go together. When there is intestinal permeability, the liver also suffers. Additionally, there is the decarboxylation of aromatic amino acids, which is essential for the metabolism of serotonin and catecholamines. 2001. Many times we focus on treating the intestine, but we do not help with liver detoxification. So, never forget to support detoxification in any treatment, with supplementation with food, which can also be done with fasting. Yes, I like fasting. What can I say? I use it, I apply it. I was really excited yesterday by an endocrinologist who, when he gave the talk, I went down and hugged him because he finally talked about how the 5 meals we have always counted are not necessary. They are not. There is no scientific evidence for the 5 meals. And yes, we are getting more and more increasingly powerful studies about intermittent fasting, such as low-calorie diets, etc. I mention it here in this slide because for me, apart from other 1,000 forms I use to detoxify, it is one of the cheapest, easiest, and most ancestral mechanisms to enhance liver detoxification. This is the first study that I am going to explain to you. Freshly out of the oven, as you can see, from October 21st, 2019, and it is a study in which they conduct a short-term dietary intervention. I believe it lasts 3 weeks. And they clearly demonstrate how the symptoms of depression improve. Can someone explain to me why this is not applied as the first tool, when a person walks through the door with depression? I'm not just talking about psychiatrists. I'm talking about primary care doctors. I'm talking about everyone. Why isn't the diet changed as soon as they enter? It's cheaper, easier, and healthier. It's impossible to find something better. It has been proven and published recently. Well, in the end, what this study concluded was the importance of B vitamins, omega-3, and zinc, as inadequate levels of any of these nutrients are associated with a higher risk of depression. On the contrary, the consumption of fast junk food has a dose-dependent association, which is very important in medicine because it explains the relationship between the increased consumption of processed foods and high glycemic index foods, primarily industrial pastries, resulting in a 38% increase in risk. In just 3 weeks, dietary changes can reduce symptoms of depression. Now, all psychiatrists, please get a nutritionist. So get trained. Well, there weren't many patients. I don't remember the number. I think I have it with other patients. Age 17 to 35 with moderate to severe depression and high intake of fat, sugar, and carbohydrates. And the depression levels remain similar in the control group, but decreased significantly in the dietary intervention group. The diet, based on fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, cinnamon, and turmeric, was not vegetarian. It included lean meats, eggs, fish, and olive oil. In other words, the dietary intervention wasn't very strict either because we use much stricter dietary interventions. In fact, they weren't even organic, which is how our diet should be. But, well, still, quite. What they did do was eliminate sugars, refined flours, processed meats, and sugary sodas. I mean, it's logical, right? The logical thing, what anyone would say, is a healthy diet, but it doesn't happen. Honestly, it doesn't happen. How many times have you gone to a specialist who first tells you, before saying you need to see a psychologist or prescribing a pill, to remove this from your diet? Well, that's it. I won't say it again. Thank you. Well, this is just to make you aware of the deficiencies. This is explained. I mean, it's not that these vitamins are deficient. They all have these symptoms within the context of their material. It's not medical material. Within their definition of deficiency, these symptoms are included, so it's nothing new. This has been studied. Well, I will skip this because Ma will explain it. Just know that there are many more impulses from the gut to the brain than from the brain to the gut. And there is a very important connection between the enteric nervous system and the central nervous system. Important? The gut is an abundant source not only of the dopamine and serotonin that we need intact, but also of benzodiazepines, which is the family of psychoactive chemical agents included in medications such as Valium and Orfidal. It is also essential for hormonal issues and for isoflavones, for example, to have an effect. Some isoflavones require equal, which in turn needs an intact gut microbiota. An intact gut microbiota also prevents, which I won't mention here, but in case my colleagues don't bring it up, the recirculation of estrogens, which means that many symptoms related to premenstrual syndrome, polycystic ovary syndrome, and difficult menopausal experiences are linked to alterations in the microbiota and are related to the liver. But well, we are not talking about these now, so I won't go into it. We will talk later about serotonin and dopamine. But simply by taking a questionnaire about this series of symptoms that are quite different between serotonin and dopamine, we could get an idea of which of the two neurotransmitters is involved. There are different nutritional interventions to boost serotonin and to boost dopamine. For example, dopamine is significantly enhanced by having a bit of animal protein in the morning. For example, serotonin. There are some foods that are rich in serotonin, such as pure chocolate, which should not contain sugar and should have organic cocoa, etc. Cherries are indeed foods that are very rich in serotonin. All right, so I'm going to skip over this part for now because I really want to take some time to discuss and elaborate a little bit more about the USAND in detail, providing you with a comprehensive understanding of the topic. This is important because USAND is a complex subject that requires a thorough explanation to fully grasp its nuances and implications. By taking the time to delve into the specifics, we can ensure that you have a solid foundation and a clear understanding of all the key points related to USAND. I wanted to reach the point that intestinal symptoms often reflect personality and psychological conflicts. Insecurity, fear, and anger cause disturbances in the gut. As Ma will explain, I went through it very quickly, but what I wanted to tell you with this is that the conversation between the gut and the brain is complicated and bidirectional. There are also changes at the brain or psychological level that produce alterations in the gut. In fact, stress is a fundamental cause of dysbiosis. I would say it is the number one cause of dysbiosis. And at the same time, dysbiosis produces, as we have seen through, serotonin, dopamine, vitamins, etc., neurological alteration. Okay, what I told you about endocrine alterations, thyroid function, adrenal function, and reactive hypoglycemia whenever it occurs, but well, I understand that this is indeed done. Reactive hypoglycemias, you should know the symptoms: nervousness, irritability, exhaustion, dizziness, drowsiness, forgetfulness, insomnia, worry, and anxiety. These are the symptoms presented by people with reactive hypoglycemia, which makes it another intervention that is easy to implement. Okay, and now let's talk a little bit about multiple sclerosis, a little bit about Alzheimer's. Relationship between inflammation and the brain. Yesterday, it was also mentioned in these sessions that the basis of all neurological diseases, and in general, almost all diseases, is inflammation. And indeed, inflammation can be wonderfully modulated by diet. Let us not forget. Our digestive tract has not evolved as quickly as our diet. We still have the digestive system suited to when we were hunter-gatherers. So, what happened then? Our diet was very high in fat and protein and very low in carbohydrates. Very poor. In fact, they were only consumed in the form of red fruits and at the end of summer to give us a little time to hibernate in winter. I have corrected the libido, but it has not been corrected. It is not libido from reticular libido. That is libido with a B. I'm sorry. So, recent studies point to gluten as a poison that causes diseases. Well, I took this literally from a book called Grain Brain by an American neurologist who is not just anyone. He is an American neurologist named David Perlmutter. I'm leaving now, and they are telling me that I have to finish and that we have many scientific sources, but not published in just any journal. Look, USEND Archives of Neurology issued a report on celiac disease and cognitive dysfunction. In 2012, the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease revealed that elderly individuals who follow a diet high in carbohydrates have 4 times the likelihood of developing mild cognitive impairment, which is considered a precursor to Alzheimer's. In 2017, the journal Neurology published a study involving more than 8,000 people, following them for 4 years, to identify patterns in dietary habits. Those who consumed omega-3 daily, not through supplementation, but in the form of flax seeds and small fish without bones, especially small fish because they contain less mercury, had a 44% lower risk of developing such diseases compared to a 37% risk for those who never ate fish, whose risk increased over those 4 years. So, take note. This is from 2017. All right, that's it. I won't talk about multiple sclerosis because I don't have time. I hope you found it useful, and now we will move on to the next speaker, which is you. Yes.